My name is Matt Watson. I've been the CTO of several different startups over the last 20 years, and I have a lot of experience with hiring local contractors, global contractors, staff aug. I've done all of these different things, and along the way, I even accidentally started a dev agency. So I'm going to give you my insights today about all the different ways that you can do this and some of the pros and cons to think about, and there are a lot of them. First and foremost, we all know that offshore development or outsourcing is a big part of building software these days. It's very expensive to hire software developers, especially in the United States. And let's face it, 90% of software developers are not in the United States. There's a lot of talent all over the world. And COVID-19 taught us a lot about working remotely. And if you're hiring somebody remotely, you can hire somebody globally. So by doing outsourcing, you can tap into the global talent. And as most of us know, global talent is a lot less expensive. Let's be honest, 80% of software developers in the world make less than $50,000 a year. There's great talent all over the world, and they're much more affordable, and that's why most companies leverage them. But the question is, how should you leverage them? I've done a lot of different project work over my career, and at certain times, it absolutely makes sense for short-term little projects that need to be done. For example, what if you need to build like a weird little WordPress plugin? It's not a long-term commitment. It's not a big job. It's a small, weird little thing. I don't really care who does it. I just need them to do it and give me the code back, and then I'll figure out how to support it potentially. Somebody on my team maybe can figure out how to maintain it if we need to. Or in the past, I've hired experts to come in and help me with Elasticsearch. It's like I'm using Elastic. I don't know how to scale this thing, I have performance issues. Bring in the experts, come and help me. I've also done staff augmentation where I've hired full-time developers. I've hired developers before in Russia, Latin America, Philippines. I've worked with developers all over the world that were dedicated working for my startups, and I've largely had good experiences with all of them. But the question is, when should you do project-based and when should you do staff augmentation? A lot of people who've done offshore development before have done it in project-based mode or in sort of a hybrid where they're working with a project manager who kind of controls everything, and it's not a dedicated team that works directly for them. And that is a lot of the reasons that project-based outsourcing doesn't work, okay? Part of the problem is those companies may be juggling multiple projects, and if you've given them specific milestones or a statement of work to be done, all they really care about is getting that work done and they can move on to the next project. They want to put as little energy as possible potentially into the project. They want to get the project done and they want to move on. Okay. And where this is even worse, honestly, is where you can't build a long-term team and a long-term partner, right? Like think about building a house. If you go and you hire people to build your house, they want to get done with the house and they want to move on to the next house as fast as possible. But if you're building software, you know the software is going to need maintenance, care, and feeding for the long haul. Like you need the people building the house to live in the house and help you maintain this thing. So you don't really want them to put as little effort as possible and move on to the next house. You need that tribal knowledge. You need them to help and support this thing. So having dedicated resources is very important. And that's one of the benefits of staff augmentation. And we'll get into more about that in a minute. But when does it make sense to do projects? Well, it makes sense when you don't need a full-time person. It's very common to have weird little projects. Like now, smaller companies don't have a full-time lawyer on staff, right? Like now we pay $400 an hour for their time. So it makes sense to have high-powered consultants to come in and do that kind of work, or maybe very low-cost contractors to do weird little projects. It can make a lot of sense to mix that into your needs. Project-based work is best when you have those small projects, you know exactly what needs to be done, you can get bids from potentially multiple different contractors, which potentially can help you control cost. You're like, hey, we know it's going to cost $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is, to get this exact project done. But odds are when the project is done, so are those contractors. They're probably going to move on to the next thing, and you're going to have to support this thing after that. But that brings up the problem. How are you going to support this thing after that if this is your business? Now, the hybrid approach here is to hire fractional resources that can work for you. For example, a fractional chief technology officer or fractional consultant or architect or whatever you want to call them that potentially could help you bridge this gap. You're like, well, maybe I have an offshore team or in-house team, but I need a high power person to come in and help define the work and be that consultant. that could work great. And that's where a mix sometimes works really good. But you have to understand, like, you can hire people offshore for maybe $30 or $40 an hour, but you might have to pay that high powered fractional CTO or consultant $250 an hour or a lot more. And part of your struggle is just figuring out how do you balance those. But if you do both of them together, it works really good. All right, let's talk about staff augmentation. A lot of you may have done it in the past of just hiring local contractors. You call local IT staffing companies and they do direct to hire, or they do 90-day contracts or different kinds of contracts. That is also potentially a form of staff augmentation, okay? But instead of doing it locally with those sort of local contractors, now you're just doing it globally. And it's a great way to build a long-term dedicated team that works directly for you. And the key is it gives you control. Those employees work for you. They work however you want to work. Your tools, they assimilate to your business processes and your development process, ultimately giving you full control. Instead, when you're doing project work, you're kind of throwing that work over to them. They're doing all the work and you're getting the results back. Where in staff augmentation, you're in control. So something else that's weird to think about is actually developers that are project-based could be potentially a lot better or a lot worse than the ones that do staff augmentation. Let me explain. I mentioned earlier you could go hire those really expensive consultants that come in. They might charge $200 something an hour, and they're really, really good. But when you're doing offshore, and especially if you're dealing with somebody that's doing projects, the developers that are doing the work can be of lower quality and nobody would know because you don't talk to them. So for example, they might not be very good developers. Maybe they don't even speak English and you have to micromanage them. And there are a lot of junior people. They're just not very good developers. However, the project manager that runs the project is somehow able to get the work done. You get your WordPress plugin or whatever it is, and you don't really care. You don't really care who did the work. But that's not the same with staff augmentation. When you're doing staff augmentation, the developer themselves is the product. They're working directly for you. If you worked with these people for a week, you'd be like, man, their communication skills are terrible. They don't ask the right questions. They just don't know what they're doing. I don't like working with these people. They might have worked fine in the other mode of these projects because they're hiding behind the project manager. But when you're doing staff augmentation, overall, the developers are going to have to be better developers. They're going to have better communication skills. And that's one of the things we deeply understand at Fullscale because that's what we do. So when we hire people, we're hiring people that have great communication skills, that are great team players and great at collaboration. Project-based developers don't necessarily have to be quite as good. The key to staff augmentation is you're doing it for a long-term dedicated team. You want people to feel like they're part of your team. One of the things I've heard many times from talking to our customers and other people is they get frustrated. Like, oh, we have these developers, they're in some other country, that's fine, but they just don't feel like they're part of our team. Like, we want somebody that's going to go to battle with us, that's part of our team. Let's go build this thing. Let's go win together. And when you do staff augmentation, you're going to get more of that because you're working together every single day and it feels more like a team. But when you're doing project-based stuff, it just never feels that way because they're just a lot more distant. And so that's one of the real advantages of staff augmentation. It feels like you're all working together and you get that tribal knowledge going. And these contractors will work for you for a very long time. They're not necessarily short-term employment. At Fullscale, we have teams that have been together for over 5 years. Our employee retention year over year is over 90%. So if you work with a dev agency like us, you can potentially have a dedicated team that's going to be with you for a long time. You're not necessarily going to have a lot of turnover if you find the right partner that has good retention. All right, let's talk about some of the challenges with staff augmentation. It has its own cons. One of those is if you're hiring the talent, okay, the dev agency gives you 4 different developers. How are you going to manage them? What are they going to do? Do you know how to manage these people? Because if you went to Fullscale and you ask us, hey, we need 4 developers, we're like, hey, here's 4 developers. They're going to show up and you work for you tomorrow. It's all up to you now. How are you going to manage them? Well, it works a lot better, honestly, if you have a CTO or a dev leader in-house. That's where we see the best success. Although it is possible for a dev agency like us to provide that level of management, maybe provide a fractional CTO or provide a type of product owner that embeds themselves in the team and they can work with you and run the team on a day-to-day basis, which is actually what I did with one of my previous startups. I was the core product owner and I would meet with one of our product owners from Fullscale and he would be kind of my proxy product owner. And the key name for this today, I think they call it product operations. That's like the cool thing to call it. But it's the person that runs like requirements, goes to all the stand-ups, does the release planning, basically helps run the team. That person is really, really critical. And when any kind of software development usually fails when you don't have this person. And if your company doesn't in-house have any software developers and you're just hiring 3 or 4 contractors or something, if you don't have this piece, odds are your project's not going to go very. So if you want to be successful with staff augmentation, I highly recommend having a fractional CTO, some kind of in-house development leader of some form that knows how to break down the work, define the work, and then can delegate it out to the team. Now let's talk about some of the benefits of working with an agency like Fullscale. Now, could you go to Upwork and find random developers around the world? Yes, and there are a lot of different marketplaces to find these people. A lot of people come to Fullscale, they're like, I've had people on Upwork, I'm tired of messing with it. I find out they actually have 3 jobs, or they ghost me, or next thing you know, like crazy story, it's like, oh, they were working for the Mexican cartel, or they're actually a contractor through North Korea or whatever, like all this weird stuff. You hear all these weird horror stories. People usually come to us, they're like, I'm tired of jacking around with these freelancers. I want a partner I can trust. I want somebody that I know will give me excellent high-level talent. Like I've tried offshore before and I've had bad developers from India or Russia or wherever. I've had bad experiences. I just want to work with somebody I know that I can trust is going to give me the talent that I need, and I don't have to jack with any of this. So one of the advantages at Fullscale is we're really good at recruiting. We have 7 full-time recruiters, and we're really good at finding really good talent in the Philippines. We know what that looks like. We interview hundreds of people. We understand the local culture and some of the uniqueness about the culture. And we also help our customers deal with like all the HR laws and benefits. And yes, can you hire random freelance developers from the Philippines? Yes, you can. But for those developers, they don't actually like doing that for the same reason that a lot of people in the United States, for example, don't like being a 1099 employee. They'd rather be a W-2 employee so they get better benefits and they feel like they have a little more job security. And for everybody, job security is the most important thing. Let's be honest. Most people just want to do their job, have a family, whatever, and live their life. And this extra job security is important to them. And at Fullscale, we definitely give our employees that extra job security and, part of the legal laws that come from the Philippines, all that stuff. They also know if one of our clients, the project ends for whatever reason, we potentially can find them their next job. They're not worried about like losing their income. So there are a lot of benefits for them as the employee side for working for a local Filipino company and a local dev agency. And don't discount that when you're thinking about hiring people from around the world. There are benefits for those people to work through the dev agencies as well. There are also a lot of other benefits for you for working through a dev agency besides just the recruiting and some of the legal aspects. So an agency like us at Fullscale, we have over 250 software developers. So because at our size, we can invest more resources into things like career growth, training, mentoring, team bonding, all these different activities to treat your employees like you would want to treat your local employees. We're able to treat your employees that are working for your offshore team at a much higher level. And potentially a lot of our clients, maybe we do things that they would never be able to do in-house. Like they might have 5 developers or 10 developers in-house. They would never have the resources internally even to do this kind of stuff. At our scale, we're able to do that. We do thorough quarterly reviews. We're always trying to help our developers upskill. We have a whole career growth framework. We have all these other things that we do that are a big benefit to our employees and to our clients. So I've walked you through some of the benefits of doing project-based development and dedicated teams via staff augmentation. There's definitely a time and a place for both. I think the key thing is you want to do project outsourcing if it's short term or you have no in-house expertise at all and you're like, man, I just need somebody to figure this thing out. I never want this in-house skill set. I just want a partner to go figure it out, right? Versus if you want to have this internal skill set and you need a long-term team that's going to work directly for you, you control the process, which is most SaaS companies. Like you build a product, you want that product expertise in-house. Think about hiring these dedicated teams. They're still in-house. They still work directly for you and you control the process. So that is my recommendation to you. If you're doing any kind of SaaS company, building any kind of product, staff augmentation is absolutely the way to go. And if you've done offshore before and you've had some bad experiences, I promise you'll have a way better experience. If you do staff augmentation, you work directly with the team on a day-to-day basis, and you find a partner you can trust like Fullscale that can provide you super top talent. And if you have any problems at all, we're always here to mitigate and figure out how do we solve those problems. At the end of the day, quality of talent is the number one thing of all. And if you want to find the really, really top talent, that's where you can go to dev agencies that potentially have had some of these employees for years and have some really, really rock star developers and can make them available to you at a very affordable rate. Again, staff augmentation is the way to go. I hope this was helpful for you today. I first started doing staff augmentation myself about 10 years ago. I started Fullscale actually because I needed to hire developers, and I hired about 10 developers in the Philippines, and this sort of became an accidental business, honestly. And then I sold that company, I started another company, sold that company, and then just decided, you know what? What we do at Fullscale is great, and I love helping other technology leaders build the amazing teams that I was able to get access to. So if you're looking for a partner you can trust, help you build an offshore team, definitely give us a call. And check us out at fullscale.io. You can look me up on LinkedIn. Always happy to consult and give you some advice. Thank you for checking out this episode of Product Driven.